Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Wayne Jones. He's a writer, editor, and a podcaster. He's a podcast host of Writing and Editing Podcast. Welcome to the show, Wayne.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You are welcome to the show, Ben. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. We will be talking here about minimalism and how a minimalist mind works. So, first to understand from you, Wayne, why you have written a book about minimalism. What made you write about minimalism? And then we'll come to the other questions around this.
Yes, for sure. Basically, the main impetus for me writing it was that I've always been a minimalist as far as sort of possessions go. I have a very spare domestic space. I like things neat. I don't like to keep things around that I don't use. And I started to wonder what this says about my personality. So the book is a little bit about the impetus behind minimalism, why people want their environments to be like that, but it's mostly about how it also translates out into your general personality and how you treat people.
Exactly. So what did your inward journey, understanding about your own self, what did you understand? How should people, or how do people understand who you are? Are you a very miser person who does not want to spend, or are you a much more smarter person, who only uses things that he needs?
That's interesting because it never had anything to do with being miserly. It never had anything to do with, well, I could save a lot of money if I didn't have a lot of furniture or anything like that. It's nothing like that at all. It really, because I like to live in lovely, comfortable, beautiful surroundings. But what it had to do with was clutter and unnecessary things and things that I wasn't using anymore. So as I say, I then wondered, yes, I like this in my environment, but do I treat people like that? Just to give you an example, I'm thinking of, for example, if you have a messy room and you go into a messy room and you clean it up a bit, and then you may throw a few things out. And I wonder whether I also treat people like that, where, say if a relationship got messy or got a little bit difficult to handle or something like that, was my tendency to say, okay, no more relationship, or would I put in the work to make it better?
Okay, so what did you find out about yourself? Because I also consider myself not a minimalist in that strict sense, but I also want to only keep things, which are important. Don't like too much of clutter. I want to keep all the things that one needs in house or anywhere else, but in a way that it does not clutter your life and as well as your mind. I want to wonder, but is it the same about relationships? Do minimalists consider relationships as things around them, or is it something much more closer to the heart? That's what they do think for.
Yeah, no, it's definitely. I have lots of great relationships that are close to the heart and everything. Perhaps what can help to sort of put it into context is that, for example, you say that you're a minimalist, and what I discovered, or when I was researching, was that there's probably three main reasons why people, generally speaking, most people are not minimalists. And the three main reasons are that they keep saving things because they think in the future I will have a use for this. And yet what they'll find, I've heard lots of stories of people moving from house to house, and when they move to the new house, they move 10 boxes of things that they never ever opened up in the previous house. And the other two reasons that people have for keeping things are that they have sentimental value. So it may not have practical value, but it's something that has something to do with something that happened personally in your life. And the other one is a sense of obligation. For example, if your mother gives you a blanket or something like that, you will tend to keep that because it feels a little weird and a bit dismissive to throw it away, even though you may not be using it. And then to extrapolate that to the emotions, Yeah, what I found out about myself is that I have that tendency, or maybe I can say had that tendency, because part of the book was a kind of a voyage of discovery where it's useful to know this about yourself so that you can rein it in or control it or stop doing it. And I realized that when relationships got difficult, my first impulse is always, okay, let's end this relationship. And I'm talking about romantic relationships, friendships, whatever it might be. And so that's what I learned, that it, at least in my case, and I think in a lot of people's cases, if you're a strict minimalist, and maybe it depends on the continuum that you're on, uh, you will do the same things with people as you do with things.
Okay, okay, that's interesting. And let's understand it a bit in this manner. Who is a minimalist and who is a hoarder? So does it mean that a minimalist consider mess as well as anything related to relationships mess as something they don't want to keep in life? And people who hoard a lot of stuff in their lives also hoard relationships in as valuable as sense that they keep things. Help us understand who is a minimalist and who is a hoarder then.
Right. I would hazard a guess that most of the world is not minimalists, or not strict minimalists, because a lot of people have trouble. Certainly, anecdotally, when I've talked to people, they have trouble getting rid of things, either for practical purposes or because it's all Christmas stuff from 20 years ago or whatever it might be. And like in most continuums, once you meet around the back, a hoarder and a strict minimalist have a lot in common. Basically, they're both kind of suffering from something that has to do with relationships. Just because someone is a hoarder doesn't mean that they have lots of friends and they're leading a great life and they have everyone around them and they have a messy house. You could be, let's say, a collector rather than a hoarder and have it all very well organized, but you just happen to have a lot of things. So a minimalist goes the other way. They not only have things in order, but they like to have things, fewer and fewer things. And in my own case, for example, with the objects I have around me, I feel them as kind of a weight on my back. And part of it has to do with independence, and part of it has to do with mobility. I like to be able to say that I can go anywhere at any time very soon. And if I lose any of the personal objects that I have about 4 or 5 things that I'm sentimental about, not very many. Uh, it won't bother me so much. I'll just replace them. Whereas for a lot of people, they have a lot of things in their house and a lot of things in their life that they're very sentimental or feel an obligation towards, that they would have difficulty giving up.
Right, right, Ben. Let's understand, being minimalist as well as somebody who does not want clutter. So, how do you see minimalism and decluttering? Is it the same thing or are these two different things?
Yeah,
Because one may be minimalist and still there might be a lot of clutter.
that's true. Uh, yeah, in order to be a minimalist, you have a tendency toward decluttering. Basically, I mean, to put it simply, you want fewer objects around you. That's the idea. And in order to do that, of course, you have to declutter. You have to formally, you like a hard look, give a good hard look at all the objects that you have in your home. Look deeply into your closets. Look deeply at your garage, whatever it might be, and make a call and say, you know what? I haven't touched this in 6 months, or we've had that box here since we moved here 4 years ago. Perhaps the objects that are in that box are not necessary. And a lot of people can do that, but they can't make the hard move to say, okay, we're throwing it away or we're selling it. So to answer your question, yes, in order to be a minimalist, you have to be someone who's interested in decluttering.
Right. But have you ever found, Ben, that in this path of being minimalist, you do not have the things that you need around? Or is it that, People who say, for example, a lot of things earlier on, like a table clock, like a calendar, so many things might be there around your working desk, but now you don't need, because you can put it all in a high level mobile phone, and that phone is perhaps much more sophisticated or technologically very sound and costlier even than a lot of things put together. So what you have done is you have replaced so many things with one thing which is much more handy, much more useful, and much more compact. That gives you, that gives you a lot of space, that gives you a lot of peace of mind. So how do you look at that? Isn't it being much more focused? A lot of people who are trying to reduce things, external things, so that they can focus on things which are, much more. That's why they talk about this word called being focused, being intentional, and also to give away things so that others can use it. You don't just keep it. Earlier days, because things were difficult to find, nowadays it's just a click away.
You're very correct in the sense that, for example, I don't need a watch. I don't need a clock in my office. I don't need to keep photo albums anymore because I have that all electronically. And, I have it all right here, for example. Here it
Right.
is here in a very compact space. And but a lot of people just can't make that step to do that. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they think that something that's they've had around, they either feel obliged to keep it because they've had it for a while, or they just can't get rid of it. But one of the things is what you alluded to there, and I often tell people when I talk about this to them, is that one of the benefits of being a minimalist is that you can give your things away or sell your things at a low price to people who really, really need them. And you obviously don't need them because you're not using them. And that's a good karma thing. There's probably 1,000 poor people in my city who could benefit from having an extra pair of shoes or a blanket or a clock or whatever it might be that I am not using and will never ever use. So that's a good reason that I often offer people for being a domestic minimalist.
Right. Uh, let's look at the advantages and disadvantages, Wayne. What advantages have you found in your life? What are the disadvantages that you have found being a minimalist?
It's a good question. The advantages I found is that, and this may just reflect my personality, but perhaps this comes along with a lot of minimalist minded people, is that it allows me to focus. For example, on my desk here now, I don't have anything on my desk here that's unnecessary. I don't have piles of this and something I should have done yesterday and a shopping list here and stuff like that. I can't work like that. So that's an advantage. It allows me to focus on being on this podcast, for example, or earlier I was doing some editing. It allows me to really focus. And some of the disadvantages, though, is that I have had the occasion, for example, of throwing out things that later I thought, wow, maybe I shouldn't have thrown that out. However, if I did the math on it, I would say that for every 1,000 things I throw out, there's only about one or two that I regret. And I can give you an example. I remember throwing out, I think it might have been one of the first short fiction stories that I ever wrote. And it was back in the day when, you used a typewriter and typed it out. I regret that decision now because I would like to have that story. I know the title of it, but I can't, it's gone. It's forever gone. And I regret that decision. That was back when perhaps I was still a minimalist, but never thought it through and thought, this is of value. And now what I would do, for example, would be to take the paper, make it into a Word document or scan it and keep it on my computer and in the cloud. So there are some disadvantages. You can have a tendency to go overboard. It's sort of like if you're in a car that has a big engine, you have to be careful that you're not going too fast all the time because the car wants to go faster and faster and faster.
Right, Wayne. Right, I understand that, and And now technology has given you that space, that some of the things that you don't want to see around but want to find them, if you, whenever you need them, you always can put them in in the cloud, whether Dropbox or Drive or any other option that you may want to. You just have to push that particular file onto and a thing like this, and it will be there in behind your mind, but out of your sight, not to bother you any day like any other file. And plus those can be accessed from anywhere in the world. That's why a lot of people rely on such things, for accessing documents from anywhere else. You don't need to carry all those things in today's time.
Yes. And another thing that often comes along with minimalism is being very organized. Because, for example, if you just take the cloud, it's okay to have things in the cloud, and it's okay to have things on your hard drive on your computer. And I do that because I like to have backup. However, you have to organize it in some way. If you just have a mess in one folder of 35,000 documents, that's not part of a minimalist mindset. Generally speaking, along with minimalism comes the tendency to be super organized as well. And when you're I want to say here, I'm not saying this is the best mode in the world, or people who don't do this, they're lacking in some way. That's not the case at all. I'm saying that some people tend to be minimalists, like myself, and we thrive better when things are decluttered and when things are very well organized. Some people are fine, the stereotype of the desk with the piles of paper and all that sort of thing. People, that's fine. They can work in that, no problem at all. I cannot, but some people can. However, if, for example, you get to the point where you've got too many piles of paper on your desk and you actually can't have room for your keyboard, perhaps you might want to have a look at some of the piles and declutter a little.
Right. When is it because people who are a bit more into writing, into editing, they tend to be a bit more towards the minimalist side, because you see, when you are editing, you have got so much of unnecessary stuff around whatever someone else has written, that maximum job is to remove that and find sense in it. And that is why you tend to keep on removing things that is not required at all. In editing, obviously you have to push it down or cut it out fully if you are so convinced, but the whole idea is to make sense of all that writing. Even I see that, even while doing podcasts, I see that I don't want too much of information from the guest, because I will then lose my way. My mind will not work asking in real questions. My mind will then not be able to think of things that are not there on that piece of paper. Then it will become too much of a rehearsed thing. That is why I never try to in advance I want to meet my guests and all. It will be like then not an interview, because then when you have not talked to a person before, you are talking them for the first time, you talk like friends in a very nice atmosphere, but you are very curious, you are inquisitive, and then that inquisitiveness also drives. I want to understand, is it because a lot of I've been in journalism, a lot of my friends are journalists, but I've never asked these questions. I'm asking you, is it because you are into writing line, so you tend to become much more, or is it because God has made people minimalists that way? For example, if you ask me, I do not keep even a lot of these electronic documents, even for example, WhatsApp messages. So
Yeah.
many messages come all throughout my life. I've always deleted them. Anyone who wants to send me an important thing, I just tell them, please send a mail. Otherwise, tomorrow, if you tell me I've sent you a WhatsApp, I will accept it. But I will not consider is it an official something like that, which is, because I cannot keep it. Many people download all that thing, export it. For me, it is not required. It's a messaging service. That's it. Only if it's so much of an important document that then I will just make sure that it gets somewhere on the computer, or I print it out. But rest is, it otherwise bothers me too much. I want to understand this. Second about this is, have you faced difficulty from friends and family? I have faced. My wife tells, You always delete all those things before you even say, I say, I seen this. After seeing, it's in my mind. I remember if I need to write it, I can't keep on holding until unless it's otherwise, I get lost. Every time there has to be something important, then I know this needs my attention. Otherwise, I don't. Do you have you ever faced or being judged by friends, families, relatives? Has it ever happened?
No, really, because what happens is that you have to make a judgment on every deletion that you make. For example, if someone were to send you, just to use your example, if someone were to send you a WhatsApp message, and in that message they told you what their cell phone number is, I don't keep my cell phone numbers in WhatsApp messages. I keep it in my list of contacts. So I would
Right.
immediately take it from there, put it in my list of contacts, and they get rid of the WhatsApp message. So someone later can't come along and say, hey, I sent you a WhatsApp message with my cell phone number, because I will say, oh, yeah, I have it. You're in my contacts now. So it's always a judgment call. But sometimes, as I was saying in the example of the short story, sometimes you make the wrong judgment, you make the wrong call, and you're a little too overzealous about throwing things out. And to answer your question about the editing, whether that kind of gives you a mindset of getting rid of things, again, that involves judgment. Because, yes, an editor, for example, if it's a rambly sentence that has repetitions and all sorts of things in it like that, an editor will have a tendency to want to cut that back.
Yes.
However, it's judgment in the sense that the editor has to be mindful of the style and the tone and the everything else of the story that the author is writing. So, but it's a good point that you make about the connection between editing and being a minimalist, for
Yeah,
sure.
it would be interesting to ask more friends whether they are also much more of the my kind of people or your kind of people who want to and obviously they are there in terms of others from every other area, and some of this being focused much more things about much more conscious about being focused helps them people in different professions, and they then create their working style. Be that as it may, how did you manage to treat this subject in this book? Did you just take one only about your example, or did you lay out things for people also to follow whatever their personality is being? You can say keeping very okay with things around, and some who want to just be keeping everything spick and span.
I wrote the book as a memoir in the sense that I was writing autobiographically about an aspect of my life. So basically, what I did is I brainstormed a lot of things that had to do with minimalistic things or tendencies or actions that I had taken my entire life, right from childhood, and I worked from that, and I ended up with a pile of things that was way too much, and maybe ironically or appropriately, I ended up having to cut out a lot of it and then rearrange it. And my purpose was always to use my life and to be as truthful as I could about it. It's often difficult to be truthful about yourself, especially when you're exposing yourself, uh, in an embarrassing way, that kind of thing. But I wanted it to be useful to other people as well. I didn't want it to be just a book that I would carry with myself to help me in my life. And so, even though it's based on my own practices, I think there's something in there that others could learn about it as well. Plus, I did additional research as well, interviewed psychologists and other people about it as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, for people who would want to know more about you, Wayne, for people who would want to get hold of your book on minimalism, less and less, if I understand, that's the name of the book.
Right.
So, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
The best, if you just want to go to one website, you just go to waynejones.ca and that'll link you to everything. But if you just go to Amazon and look for Less and Less with my name, Wayne Jones, you'll find it there. It's available in ebook and it's available in print. And I've just put a new cover on it as well. So appropriately, it's a very short book. It's probably, I'm going to say 70 or 80 pages long. It's a pretty short book. So I like to keep it tight.
Absolutely. That's what a minimalist is all about. To speak, to speak also as less number of words that is required. Rest is, not needed. When not needed, you don't keep it. With
Yeah.
this, with this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thanks for having me.